If you've been making quilts, you probably have scraps and you may not have any clue what to do with all these scraps. For years, I used to give away my scraps because I had what I called scrap guilt. I had all these amazing fabric scraps, but no way to use them, no passion about using them, no clue where to start on using them. I had friends who loved scrap quilting, so I would throw them into flat rate boxes and ship them off to friends, bring them to guild meetings, whatever I could do to get rid of the scraps so I could get started on new projects with new fabric. But it turns out that there are lots and lots of really great ways to use up your scraps and some really fun projects. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is scrap tape. If you've ever used that batting tape, that iron-on batting tape to iron on or iron together pieces of batting and turn small chunks of batting into big Franken batting pieces, this is absolutely not that. Scrap tape is heat sensitive in that it'll actually melt under the high heat of an iron, so you don't want to use an iron with it. And it is water soluble. So that means that when we dip this in water, it'll actually completely dissolve away from the back of our fabric. Now the way that you use scrap tape is that you grab one of your scraps and you put it right side up, and then you take another scrap and put it right side down, and then you sew with my favorite seam allowance, 1/4 inch-ish. Then you open it up and press. And you can finger press this, or you can use a seam roller to press this, but you'll keep going, adding scraps on. So each time just putting another scrap on, sewing, flipping it over, and pressing either with your finger or with a seam roller because you don't want to use a high heat. You can get away with a low heat iron, but you don't want a high heat iron. It'll cause this water soluble to melt because it is a water soluble and not a fusible. So you keep going and going, and then you're going to trim off both sides to the edge of the scrap tape. Now that's exactly what the scrap tape is for. It has a couple different purposes. One is so that you can trim to the edges of the scrap tape, and you know, in this case 2.5 inch wide, you know where your 2.5 inch width is. You also know exactly where to place your fabric pieces so that they continue on in a straight line, because if you were just to sew piece to piece to piece to piece to piece, you would end up with a weird snaking or even like a J shape over time, and that you wouldn't be able to trim it to a nice straight strip, which you absolutely can because the scrap tape helps keep everything in line. It also helps with any bias edges. So if you have any pieces that aren't straight on grain, you're going to have a bias stretch in there, and having the scrap tape keeps it from stretching. I keep this scrap tape in until the very end of the quilt. So I want the entire quilt top put together before I dunk it and then just let it air dry. So I'll show you a couple quilts that I've actually made with scrap tape. The first one is called the Scrappiest Quilt. Now all of these are patterns that are available, so you can check with your local quilt shop. I do have them online as well, but you know I love it when you purchase from your local quilt shop. So this one is called the Scrappiest Quilt, and it just uses a single roll of scrap tape. Actually, all three of these only use a single roll of scrap tape. This one is a Scrappy Heart Quilt, and I have it upside down. So let's get this right side up. There we go. This is the Scrappy Heart Quilt. And it's a single roll of scrap tape plus some background fabric. And then this one is a Scrappy Christmas Tree, which you can make in whatever color you want. I did a green tree, but I do want to make this again as a pink tree. I think that'd be super fun. So this is the Scrappy Christmas Tree pattern. Again, single roll of scrap tape plus some background fabric makes any one of these quilts. Now if you have a favorite jelly roll pattern that you want to make with a roll of scrap tape instead, it's 2 rolls of scrap tape. 2 rolls of scrap tape is the equivalent of a jelly roll. And it'll take you a good day to sit there and sew on all the scraps to get yourself a roll of scrap tape. But once you do, all of these fabrics are your scraps, and you'll remember the different projects that you made along the way to make these scraps. It's so fun. Hand sewing together little hexies is another great way to use up your scraps. I use the AccuQuilt die to cut all my fabric pieces as well as my papers. And I have this little kit that I'll bring places with me. So I have tons of 1-inch papers. Some of these are from the past that I've purchased, and some are that I cut with the English paper piecing die from AccuQuilt. These are just 1-inch hexes. I glue based my hexagons. I do know how to thread baste, but I'm not a fan of thread basting. So I keep lots of glue in my little kit. I keep a thimble. I keep needles. And then over on this side, I have so many ready to go basted hexagons. And I have lots of fabric that is ready to be basted and turned into hexagons to sew together. Now, when I sew my hexagons together, here's one that was in here that's in progress. I like to do what I call a slab, which is a 5x5 hexagon. Let me show you what this looks like. These are slabs that I have already done, and I just put them in my bag. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexagons wide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tall. And there's 2 in the middle that are up, and on the bottom they're down. So you can see when these go together, this is kind of like the hexagon's equivalent of a quilt block, because they can all just go together like this. And you can see that I'll have a super scrappy fun quilt when I go to put these all together. I have about a dozen of these done so far. And the other great thing about these is that once you have them made, you can take out all the hexagons from the middle and reuse them. So you want to keep all your hexagons on the outer edge, but you can take out the hexagons from the middle and reuse them in other slabs over and over until they make it to an outer edge, and then they stay there until you start sewing these together. But as soon as I sew these 2 together, I'll be able to take these 6 hexagons, the papers out, and I'll be able to reuse those. This is also a great way to make it super portable. While I am working on what I hope will be a really big quilt, I would love to have a big king size hexagon quilt. I think that'd be incredible. This makes it super portable because I'm just making these little 5x5s at a time. It's kind of modeled after my mom had a crochet project many years ago. I think it was before I was born. That was all done in panels. When she was on her breaks at work, she worked on these individual panels, and then she took those home, and at home she was able to put the entire larger unit together, and it ended up being a bedspread for on top of her bed. But she made an entire queen size piece with these more portable units, and that's the idea with doing these. Now, English paper piecing is completely hand sewn, and that's why it's nice that it's portable, because we hand sew these and we can take them wherever we want with us. Now, this third different scrap project is new to me. These are Scrappy triangles. You may have seen these around. That came out about a year ago, and these are by Lila Gardenia. She has the bigger Scrappy triangles, the smaller Scrappy triangles. She has Scrappy diamonds. She has these really fun mountains. She has Scrappy stars coming out. Ask your local quilt shop about carrying those. And these are foundation paper piecing pads that are so fun and easy to use. So this is the pad I've already been working on. This is a fresh pad, so you can kind of get an idea. They are all these really simple foundation paper piece projects. So if you're new to foundation paper piecing, this is a really great practice project for working on foundation paper piecing. And all of this dark area is great for using up scraps. And then you pick a background fabric that you want to use for your other halves of your triangles. Or you could go with bigger scraps as well. You could keep it 100% scrappy. And here are some of the blocks that I have finished, so you can see on the back. Now, if you have never done foundation paper piecing, you can go check out my foundation paper piecing video. I have one that teaches you how to learn foundation paper piecing. But once you know how to foundation paper piece, it unlocks a lot of different fun projects. So don't be afraid of trying something new. Foundation paper piecing is really amazing. So you can see I've only done 16 of these here, but it would make such a fun quilt, and I could keep going. And in this case I used blues, so I used different like hues of blue for my scraps. And then I have this fun background fabric that I use, which is from Art Gallery Fabrics, Ink Perfect Indigo. And I thought that would be a fun background to just make a really just interesting quilt. All three of these techniques do use a notion. The scrap tape uses scrap tape, but you could absolutely substitute that out with receipt paper because it's actually based on a receipt paper method. The difference is it won't be water soluble. You'll have to tear out those papers, but if you don't mind tearing out papers, not a big deal. I suggest you get yourself a foundation piecing water pen to help tear out those papers. The English paper piecing requires lots of those 1-inch hexagons or whatever size hexagon you want. I cut them out with my AccuQuilt and I get them less expensively that way. There's also different punches and you can also purchase pre-cut shapes, but it does require that notion. And the Scrappy Triangles does use those foundation paper pieced pads. Now there are techniques that don't require any kind of notion. You can actually make slabs out of your scraps as another way to use them up. Making a slab is pretty simple. You take a scrap, and these are actually some pretty big scraps, and this one has a nice straight edge on it, and you sew them together. And then you take another scrap and sew it on, and you get these larger pieces of fabric. You can sew fabrics on the side, and you can continue to make your slabs as big as you want. You can make 2 big slabs, cut a straight edge along them, and sew them together, and continue to make your slabs. You can start with a smaller piece in the center, and then grab a strip, sew it on, and then trim it off, and now you got a little bit bigger piece and keep adding on to this. Now here I have scraps that are all different kinds. When I've seen quilts made out of slabs of scraps, I find that they look nicest when all the scraps have some kind of color family, so whether they be warms or cools or blues or reds. A lot of people like to do their slabs color based, but there are lots of different ways that you can make slabs. It's just something that you want to play with and figure out what works best for you. Now I have full videos on using scrap tape, on foundation paper piecing, and on English paper piecing, and I will have all those links down in the description for you if you're interested in those. If you'd like a full video on how to turn scraps into slabs, I'm sure you can search it here on YouTube. But if you'd like me to make one, let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let me know down in the comment section if you've tried any of these techniques or which ones of these techniques you're excited to try. Alright friends, that's it for today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you right here real soon. Bye for now.